An all-new episode of The Mitch, Lafon, and Jeremy White Show.
Tuesday at noon.
Available wherever you stream.
Lionheart, Second Nature remaster with bonus tracks available January 21st. Talking about differences of opinion, I just want to go back to the Iron Maiden days, and I thought this was really interesting just reading up about it. You had Andy Scott from Sweet producing, and the rumors that he fired, Steve Harris fired him because he wanted him to play with a pick instead of with his fingers. Now, is there any truth to that?
Well, first of all, Andy Scott wasn't producing the album. I remember going to Andy Scott's studio with Steve and Rod to talk to him about maybe being one of the potential producers for the first album. But because Rod and Steve used to go off on their own to have secretly meetings with all different people, it was natural for the rest of us just to wait around and pre-production for the songs for the album, or just rehearsing them. So he never actually got to start, because I know it might be because he wanted Steve to play with a pick. It might have been because I always remember Steve saying to me he was going to get Andy Scott was going to be his first choice, because he loved the B-sides of all the Sweet songs, because a lot of people grew up thinking Sweet, they were a glam rock band.
Mm-hmm. Very glam rock.
You bundles in the early 70s and you turn them over to the B-side, they were all heavy rock, heavy metal songs, but no one played the B-side, so no one knew. And Steve loved the guitar sound and the power chords for Sweet with ball and bits and things like that. So, yes, I think Andy Scott did get approached. Not sure whether or not that was the reason why, but there was something that turned Steve off of getting him to produce. I don't know what it was. That could have been that. I don't know.
Right. Wow, interesting. I'm glad that you cleared that up, because that's a really cool story. That's actually way better than the one that's online.
I think Rod and Steve might have approached a couple of other producers that we didn't know about, but I'm not sure how they settled on Will.
Do you have an idea of who the other producers could have been? Like, who was around the scene at the time?
We weren't invited to their meetings most of the time.
Wow, doesn't sound much of a band effort then. It really was Steve's band.
Yeah, definitely Steve's. As a KISS fan, I just want to take you over to the KISS Unmasked tour that you opened up for in Italy and stuff. There is that famous show that everybody refers to as the Riot Show, where Molotov cocktails were thrown on stage and the band had to leave and hide backstage in Milan, Italy.
Yeah.
Do you remember anything about that? Were you freaked out? Had you already left, or?
No. First of all, anything there was missiles thrown at the stage, but not ones that were lit like the cocktails. There was a rumour saying that someone heard a gunshot go off. But basically, what happened was that there's a thing in Italy in them days, in the late 70s, early 80s, whereas once the crowd are in the stadium, for people that are outside that don't have tickets, somehow they let them in free, or they let them in for a reduced cost. I don't know. But what happened was that when we came on stage, I think something had happened at the back of the stadium where more people were getting, whether or not they gate crashed in, I don't know. But what we heard was that when we were back in our dressing room, because there was a tunnel at the back of the stage that went underground to the dressing rooms, and what I remember was that
this connection's killing me.
We got changed, and I always used to wait in the corridor before they went on stage, because I would always say to Gene and Paul, all four of them, I'd say, have a great gig, guys, and fist pump, because I did it at every gig. That's why a couple of the photos you see me in a black jacket, and you'll see Gene Simmons in all his makeup and his stuff, and Paul Stanley, because they're just going on stage.
Wow, so that was every time they were going on stage.
Just a jacket with them while they were waiting to go on stage. Yeah, just before they went on. So I remember this very clearly, because we were standing in the hallway, in the corridor, in the tunnel, and they'd come down about 4 or 5 steps with all their big high boots on. And I was standing there talking to them with a couple of other guys and the security guys. And all of a sudden, the security on stage all came, they sounded like a gunshot, not like fireworks. But what happened was that there was a riot, there was a surge at the front of stage where people were getting crushed. And so what happened, the security guys, when they heard the bang, they run down the steps from the stage into the corridor and they screamed at KISS to get back into their dressing rooms because the fans were climbing onto the stage to get away from the crush from the crowd.
Oh.
So basically, they were trying to turn around. And they hardly moved because they just used to clunk about, like big heavy feet. So they were to struggle to get them back into their dressing rooms. And that's what happened there. And I remember the security for KISS were all in the corridor to stop any fans coming through the corridor to get to the dressing room. So that's what I remember of that night.
Wow. That's crazy. So, it was basically like a full-on riot then.
Well, yeah. Went on stage. Because of this firework or gunshot went off, people were climbing over the crash barriers at the front to get away from the crushing and from the surge. And some people were climbing on stage. But that might have only been half a dozen youngsters on the stage. There wasn't a full-scale riot. It was just the fact that the security were taking extra measures to make sure KISS were protected. Right. And you don't know how many people, if I'd have stayed in the corridor, you might have only seen 3 run through the corridor to get out of the way, but there was enough security there protecting KISS, so there wasn't a problem.
Right. Was your safe? Were you ever in danger at some point during that whole predicament, or?
No, I come from West Ham. I've never been in danger in my life. Never.
Right.
There you go.
Oh, that's great.
Lionheart, of course, Second Nature remastered with the bonus tracks coming out January 21st. You can pre-order it now wherever you get your music. One last question before you wrap up. I thought this was really interesting reading about this. So Rocky sang backing vocals on Def Leppard's records Pyromania and Hysteria. And I'm curious, after he has those experiences, does he take any of the stuff that he's learned from being in the studio with Mutt Lange and bring it back to Lionheart and try and bring some of that stuff that he's learned back to the studio sessions with you guys? Or does he tell you any stories about working with Mutt?
Right, you froze again, but I got the question.
Oh,
no, basically, we were all at the studio with Def Leppard. Myself, Steve, and Rocky did quite a lot of session work with backing vocals in the '80s because we couldn't get a record deal. So we used to do work for other bands. We'd be brought in the studio Steve would sit by the. We had songs for the albums, like from bands like Girl, and there's a couple of other bands I can't remember the name at the moment. But Rocky used to share a house with the couple of the guys from Def Leppard, and also Frank Noon, who was helped us in the early days. And they all used to share a house. So we were always knocking around in the studio between me, Rocky, and Steve, doing backing vocals for different people, different bands. But on that occasion, Rocky was asked to do we were actually doing harmonies. Rocky just went in and done his part. It was no a special treatment or whatever. That was how it went, And we were in the studio with other people that probably using the same method as Matt. But no, it was only because me and Steve have a really mid to low range voices. And they wanted Rocky on his own because he had a really high voice. So, we put that because we first got Lionheart together in '84. As we started doing all these backing vocals, we put that in the bio, same as you put anything in the bio to promote the band. Dennis Stratton was with Maiden. Rocky Newton did backing vocals for Def Leppard. So you've got to use any little thing you can.
Right.
Yeah. Let me, one last question. What is the secret to recording really good backing vocals? Is it the gang? Is it what's the recording process of 80s backing vocals?
Now, I've got now, so we can run over it. Doesn't matter. All right, so we can talk as long as you like. But there is a method which cannot be agreed. It can never be settled. Now, for instance, we used to sing in the 80s. We used to sing with around one mic, with one can off, so you could hear in the room, and we all used to sing our 3 parts. Steve on the low part, me on the mid, and Rocky on
the high part. Mm-hmm.
And then back it 4 times or 6 times, split them. Now, we tried after that, we tried all 3 round one mic, all singing Steve's part in unison, then all singing my part in unison, then all singing Rocky's part in unison. Sometimes that worked. On Second Nature, me and Rocky drove to Hanover in Germany to get to Steve's studio so we could do the back together rather than separately. This time, we did them on our own, but I would sing my part 4 times, have a break. Steve would sing his part 4 times, have a break, and Rocky would sing his part 4 times. And it works all different ways. It works perfectly. The only good thing about singing individually is that if there's one take, one of the 4
tracks,
if one is just slightly not there out of the 4 tracks, you can find out what one it is, you go back and you redo it. Yeah. And you normally find the one that's not right is always the first one. Because once you've got it down once, you track with it, you track it again, you track it again, then you go back to the first one, and then you can redo that because you're in the zone and your head is stuck to that note. Mm-hmm. It's just always a different way of doing all different things. We're going to try.
Oh, it's frozen up.
Different from with the Reality of Miracles. We all done our vocals separately at home because we just sung the part we're going to sing and track it, and Steve put all the vocals together in Germany. But for this one, what we're going to do with this album, we're going to use the same method of me doing all my parts in unison, 4 tracks, each song, each chorus. Steve's going to do his 4 songs in 4 choruses. But what we're going to do with this album, the new one, is we're going to have Lee, the lead vocalist, joining us on backing vocals, put in 2 tracks from Lee's voice on Steve's one, my one, and Rocky's one, to give it a different bit of texture, which we've never done before. So that's what we're going to try with this album.
Wow. Very cool.
So pick the bones out of that, guys, because there's 10 different ways you can do it.
Right. Yeah, right.
That's great.
Well, is there any records that you sang backing vocals on that you're not allowed to talk about? Or is there any, was there like a big number 1 record that you sang on?
No, these were all bands in the 80s that just dwindled away by the end of the 80s. They had albums out. Girl, funny enough, Phil Lewis.
And Phil Collin.
Yeah, and Phil Collin went into join Def Leppard.
Yeah, exactly. And then Phil Lewis, I think, went on to LA Guns or something like that. But no, I'm lucky that I can sing a bit of lead vocal, and I'm doing my own shows in the UK. But it helps me because I do a lot of work for charity. So and it's a charity that I'm patron of, PTSD for ex-servicemen, and the emergency services here in the UK. So I covered David Bowie's Heroes, and it was lucky that it raised quite a lot of money for the PTSD charity. So I'm able to do a bit of lead vocal, but as long as it's in
your range, yeah.
A range. Reality Miracles with Kingdom of the East. I sing the lead vocal on a couple of the verses, the first line on a couple of the verses in the Kingdom of the East on the Reality of Miracles album.
Oh, wow.
Well,
there you go.
Cool. Well,
thank you, sir.
Lionheart, Second Nature, remastered with bonus tracks, available January 21st. You can pre-order it now. Make sure you go and pick that up. Of course, the exclusive bonus track for Japan, which you're going to get on this new version as well, which Dennis is very excited about. He loves that Beatles cover.
That's right. I love it too. It's a great cover.
Well, Dennis, let's do this again next time. And this was fantastic. Great to meet you.
And yous. Keep well, keep safe, and I hope to talk to you soon.
Yeah.
Yes,
cheers. Happy New Year.
Cheers.
And you.
An all-new episode of The Mitch Lafon and Jeremy White Show.
Tuesday at noon.
Available wherever you stream.